Hello, Quinn's class. Mr P here. So we're going to read a little bedtime story. And we're going to read two stories, really. Well, they're the same story, two books. I know we're going to start off with this one here just to set the scene about King Arthur, because we're reading that in class. And I know that some of us, our English is still developing, isn't it? Yeah, you're learning your English. I'm impressed with that. So we're going to read a little bit of this one, just to get the general story. And then I'm just going to read a tiny bit of this one, okay, which we read in class, okay? But the two scenes sort of fit together, so it's okay. All right, let me just share my screen. And where are we off to? Here we go. All right. So here we go. My mother used to start a story. She used to say to me, "Are you sitting comfortably?" And I would say, "Yes." She'd say, "Okay, then let's begin." So, are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. The Sword in the Stone. One stormy night, Merlin, a wise old wizard, left Uther's castle. Under his cloak, he carried a baby, the king's only son. Uther had given the baby to Merlin to keep him safe from his enemies. He never saw his son again. Years passed and King Uther died. All over England, knights began fighting over which of them should become the king. No one knew about Uther's son, but Merlin knew. All the knights nearby must come to the abbey in London, he announced. "Oh, what's all this then? I've got no idea." When they arrived, a strange sight met their eyes. In front of the abbey was a big square stone with a sword sticking out of it. Merlin read the words on the stone. "Whoever pulls this sword from the stone is the true-born king of England." One by one, the knights went up to try their luck, but not one of them could move the sword, not even a little way. "The king isn't anyone here," said a bishop. "We'll hold a jousting tournament to find him. Spread the word across the land so that everybody knows. Make sure you tell everybody now." As the news of the tournament spread, the country's excitement grew. Hundreds of knights came to London with their families and friends, and they set up tents. One of these knights was Sir Acton. He rode to London with his two sons, Kay and Arthur. Kay had just become a knight, but Arthur was still too young. He was only 16. Sir Acton found an inn near the tournament where they could spend the night. Early next morning, they set out. Kay was very excited. He was about to joust with other knights for the first time. But halfway there, he stopped in a panic. "I've left my sword at the inn," he cried. "I'll fetch it," offered Arthur, quickly turning and galloping off. But the inn was shut. Everyone had gone to the tournament. "Where will I find a sword?" Arthur wondered as he rode past the abbey. As he glanced into the churchyard, he saw a sword stuck in a stone. "That's perfect. I'm sure no one would mind if I borrowed it." Hurriedly, Arthur pulled out the sword and went to find Kay. Arthur raced up to Kay. "Here you are," he said, handing his brother the sword. Kay stared at it. He knew right away where it had come from. Thanks, Arthur." But he didn't tell Arthur. Instead, he snatched the sword and rushed to find their father. "Father, look," he shouted. "I have the sword from the stone. I must be the King of England." But Sir Acton was not easily fooled. "Really, my son?" he said, and he took both boys back to the abbey. Arthur returned the sword to the stone. Sir Acton and Kay tried to pull it out again, but it wouldn't budge. Then it was Arthur's turn. The sword slid out easily. At once, Sir Ector and Kay fell to their knees. Arthur was puzzled. "Why are you kneeling down?" he asked. "Read the words on the stone, sire," said Sir Ector. "But father—" "I am not your real father, Arthur. When you were a baby, Merlin brought me to you to save your life," he explained. "Now we must tell everybody that you are the king." When all the knights gathered together, Arthur was still the only one who could pull the sword from the stone. "Arthur is king!" the crowd cried, and they knelt down before him. So Arthur was crowned king, and he set up his court at a place called Camelot. So that's really the beginnings of the story, isn't it? And just to finish this off, I just want to read a little bit more. It's slightly more sort of challenging text, really. And this is the story that we're reading in class. It's still King Arthur, and I quite like this little scene. I quite like it. And it's the scene just after the one that we've just read about. So King Arthur has been king, become king, and he's having a conversation with Merlin. And Arthur, he's a little bit worried about being king. He's never been a king before. And the whole of the country, we know from our history lessons, the whole of the country was in a little bit unstable times. The Romans had left, the Saxons had come, and we know who comes after the Saxons, don't we? That's right, the Vikings then come. So it's a very, very unstable time. Yeah, so King Arthur was a little bit worried. And it's a lovely conversation between, a lovely scene between him and Merlin. And Merlin's a funny one. He's a wizard, yeah, but he can sort of split himself into two. Sometimes he's a wizard and sometimes he's a dog. Yeah, and the dog is called Bercelet. Okay, so I'm going to read just this part of the story here. Okay. So it's called Chapter 3, Excalibur. Here we go. After the feast was over, and I sat alone in the hall watching the fire dying, Bercelet lay stretched out at my feet. That's the dog. Bercelet the dog lay stretched out at my feet. His nose was in the embers and twitching in his sleep. We were silent in our own thoughts, and after a while Merlin stabbed the fire with his stick, and a few lazy sparks joined the smoke floating up the chimney. You see this fire? This is your kingdom, all that is left of it. And he prodded the fire again. There is life in this fire yet still, but it is hard to find amongst the ashes. A spark or two is all that remains. And he looked at me hard, and he held me with his eyes. The spark has to be kindled to a flame, Arthur, and the flame to a roaring fire, such a fire that will drive out all our enemies and burn off the pestilence that stalks this land. It is you, Arthur, and you alone that can kindle this fire. I will use all my powers to help you, but the powers of evil ranged against us are strong. Your 3 half-sisters will not rest until they have destroyed you. The youngest of them, Morgana Le Fay, will stop at nothing to recover the kingdom she thinks you have stolen, and believe me, she has the dark powers to do so. We must be brave enough, cunning enough, and wise enough to overcome them. Through it all, you must never flinch from your course. Your kingdom is a land where cruelty and greed are rampant, where no man, no woman may live out their lives in peace and happiness. Everywhere, in every hamlet, in every town, there is fear. Warlords roam the countryside, burning and pillaging at will, mad with their own power and lust. They do as they please. The people everywhere are trampled and cowed, and those that resist are butchered. they have no protector. No people ever needed a king as much as these. In their hovels they long for you. In their churches they pray for you. It is for them and for God that you must fight, Arthur. Never fight for yourself. And he grasped me by the arm. Have you the stomach for this fight? If you're with me, I replied. I shall be with you, but only as long as you need me, said Merlin, gazing into the fire. Some day I will have another place I must go, someone else I must be with. But you will always have Bercelet. And he reached forward and he plucked out the last charred stick and he began to draw on the floor a jagged triangular shape. What's that? I asked. That is your kingdom, he replied. Or rather, what should be your kingdom. For the present, you rule in almost none of it. You are surrounded on all sides by your enemies. Saxons here, more Saxons here, the Picts are here, the Irish are here. Many of your knights have joined them already and will fight against you, out of envy, out of greed. And even those loyal to you, those few who feasted with us tonight, have never in their lives tasted victory. They are brave men, fine men, but they are used to losing. They need to win. Arthur, defeat the Saxons just once, and you will do it again and again. Give every man a horse, and it will happen as I say. This much I promise you. That's a great little scene. I really, really like that scene. And after that, Arthur goes on to have many battles, and then the legend continues. It becomes embellished. They add things on, don't they? And there's lots of other stories about King Arthur and his knights of the Round Table. And I think my favourite story of the Knights of the Round Table is actually Gawain, the Green Knight. Yeah, that's one of my favourites. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed those stories. And yeah, King Arthur, it's a fantastic world in there, a fantastic world. And maybe one day, if you can, you might go to Cornwall and you might find and go to Tintagel Castle, which is a real castle. And they say that that is the site of where Camelot, King Arthur's castle, was. Anyway, see you again. Bye-bye.